at 5:31 PM. Ms. Ellinger, are there any public comments for the closed session agenda items?
President Linebaugh, there is not.
In that case, I shall convene to close session at this time. We will resume at 6:15 PM. 5:31 PM. Ms. Ellinger, are there any public comments for the closed session agenda items?
President Linebaugh,
Okay, I will reconvene the Belmont-Redwood Shore School District Board meeting to order at 6:19 PM. All right, starting off with item number 5, we will do our flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so announcements tonight. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and also streaming live via YouTube. And there's nothing to report out from closed session. Next, we will continue on with item number 7, the Board of Trustees report, and I will start at the end and continue through. Trustee Koo.
All right. Actually, do you mind starting from the other end? Because I was having problems.
No worries.
So my notes.
Anyone want to go next or first?
Okay. So since our last board meeting, a lot is really happening in our schools. Just within the last week, I had a chance to judge some STEM projects from Nesbitt School. And along with other judges, I was so pleased to see the ingenuity and the level of work that these students presented. I just want to mention there's one project in particular, a 6th grader did on a recharger and sanitizer for hearing aids. And the reason that was so interesting to the judges was because the student's project stemmed from his own experience in using hearing aids. And he really used his own experience to think up a better product, and thought through the design thinking process. And that was pretty nice. So that was wonderful. And then I had a chance to volunteer at Sandpiper's robotics tournament. They hosted 30 teams from around the Bay Area and actually even outside of the Bay Area. So these teams competed with each other. I think actually Amy's team, your team also competed. And they collaborate together with their alliance partners to score the highest number of points. And I just have to say, like, seeing these kids so excited about technology and robotics and learning the design thinking process, learning about robotics in a fun and engaging way was just really terrific. It was a great way to spend an afternoon. So that was a lot of fun. On the liberal arts side, National History Day contests are taking place. This year's theme is debate and diplomacy in history. And the projects that I know of this year relate to everything from First Lady Jackie Kennedy's soft diplomacy to jazz diplomacy to DACA immigration policy. So project-based learning is happening on both the STEM side as well as the liberal arts side in our classrooms. And that's really because of our dedicated teachers. And speaking of teachers, I enjoyed meeting with the staff at Fox and Cipriani schools recently for brown bags, and really appreciated their candor. Just want to share with you all that from Fox, teachers were giving some feedback about SEL programs, and they were mentioning that when we asked them to collect data or do surveys specifically on SEL, they would appreciate more feedback and sort of closing the loop and follow up on how the data is used, what we can do to improve processes. So I thought that was something to share with you all. At Cipriani, we heard some teacher concerns about completing reading assessments in a timely manner. And we actually heard from them some alternatives and some possible solutions. Superintendent DeGuara was there as well. So I think these brown bag lunches to me are so valuable because we hear directly from teachers and staff. And we really thank all the teachers for coming to meet with us. It's a valuable opportunity. And then just finally, I know you all are going to probably talk about the board retreat we just had. Just want to take a minute to publicly thank Superintendent DeGuara. I think you did a great job in terms of leading a really thoughtful and in-depth discussion about our equity statement, as well as, just our goal setting in general.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Trustee Howard?
Yeah, I don't know that I have many things to talk about in terms of things that we've been up to that don't reflect the current discussion. However, I do want to mention that February is Black History Month. And for me, Black History Month is always one of those bittersweet things. In other words, I am always proud of the successes of our Black community, but I'm also always take pause and remind myself of some of the challenges that have been overcome and remain. One of my heroes is a man named Vivian Thomas. And Vivian Thomas was recognized initially as a lab technician. He worked with a man named Alfred Blaylock and a cardiologist named Helen Taussig. And his work was groundbreaking. In 1945, they published the original piece on something called the Blaylock-Taussig shunt. It's a life-saving maneuver that allows children with cyanotic heart disease to survive. Allows them blood flow to go to their lungs so that they can actually have oxygenated blood flow. And it's a staple of the cardiac surgery even till today. The technique was developed by Vivian Thomas. The credit was given to Alfred Blaylock, and even less so to Helen Taussig, who deserved equal credit in this amazing physiologic and surgical feat. So I'm always proud of a man like Vivian Thomas, that they existed and that they were so thoughtful and dedicated to their craft. But I'm also feel bittersweet about how the credit was doled out and how much was heaped upon Dr. Alfred Blaylock, who deserves some credit. But didn't properly acknowledge the efforts of the person who did the majority of the work in this case, which was Dr. Vivian Thomas. So again, a community that has a lot to be proud of, but also as a society, we still have a lot of work to do to justify some wrongs, rectify some wrongs. Excuse me.
Thank you. And we'll go to trustee Kuno.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the extra time. So February is also the Lunar New Year, so happy Year of the Tiger to everyone. I'm actually really looking forward to the return of the Chinese New Year parade. So it is happening this year on Saturday, and for the first time, I'll be walking in the parade instead of spectating. So I'm pretty excited about that. To have the opportunity to walk with a float that's celebrating AAPI elected officials. So not sure, I doubt that I'm going to be on the float, so I'll just be in the walking masses behind. But maybe I'll get a chance to be on TV. I don't know. But the beginning of a year is also a time for strategic planning and goal setting. And there was a ton of that in January and February timeframe. So in mid-January, I participated in the API School Board Members Association Board Retreat. Initially, I worked very hard to host it locally at my workplace at Gilead, but then with Omicron surging, we made a last minute decision to go back to virtual. So it was kind of sad, but we did actually have the senior VP at Gilead speak at our lunchtime. So at least we made that connection, because I think there's a lot of commonalities in what corporations want to do, as well as what school districts and public officials want to do in terms of elevating the voices of people of color and supporting their career development, education, and combating anti-hate, hate crimes. So, a lot of the goals of APISMA that surface to the top relate to ethnic studies, because if people understand the histories and the different perspectives of people different from themselves, they'll really be more respectful of each other and more tolerant. So that's something that's really important, that now that AB 101 has passed and ethnic studies is going to be a high school requirement, let's really support districts who are trying to move ahead in that journey and even go beyond just high school, right? It's really a whole journey from K to 12. How can we incorporate those different perspectives? And then also supporting AAPI student needs post-pandemic. And then lastly, representation, both board administrators and staff doing more to make sure that the people that are surrounding our students look kind of like them and have shared experiences so that they're able to connect better with the students. So actually on Valentine's Day, there was a workshop held on the health and well-being of AAPI students that was very well received. I was actually brought to tears by the personal stories of the panelists themselves. And it was recorded, so I'm gonna share the link with everyone afterwards, because I think it's very worthwhile to take a look at it and make sure that we're not overlooking the needs of AAPI students, because they present their needs in a very different way, oftentimes very much internalized, or they go to things that are more substance abuse related, right? So they're not as likely to talk. They're very silent about it. And then the following week, I went to Huntington Beach for the CSBA Board of Directors meeting. And it was a 4-day retreat. So they were really taking us seriously. So there was a board meeting and then a full day training on equity, which I thought was great because you had representation from all parts of California. So talk about different perspectives of how everything works, right? But coming together again around stories as well as experiences. So we played a game that related to starbursts, and there were, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but you're trying to collect the most points depending on the color of starburst you have, and then the rules are set in advance. We're walking around, and it really showed that the cards you have at the beginning are pure luck. And then you get stratified into these groups, and then you're kind of stuck. And the people with the advantage don't want to change the rules to help anyone else. And so it was really eye-opening, because we could see what was happening, and we still played into it. You know, like the people in power wanted to stay in power. So I think experiential learning is really important, because that's how we emotionally connect with the concepts being talked about. And then the last 2 days was strategic planning. So 5 years ahead, how can we best support school board members as well as our students in California? And of course, there was the BRSSD board retreat as well, where we were fleshing out equity statement and the equity policy and doing our own strategic planning. So a lot of goal setting and planning all throughout the month. And then lastly, I had a chance to go to the Nesbitt and Sandpiper brown bags. So that was very informative, a lot of desire for assistant principal help, and then a lot of discussion around universal breakfast. So that's kind of the hot topic. How's it going to work? But I know it's good for students, and we'll just have to figure out how logistically it'll all work. I'm looking forward to hearing the results of the pilot. I think that's taking place at Central in Ralston. And yes, my son's team was in the robotics tournament. I've been a judge in the past, so this was the first time being the parent of a participant. So it was a very different perspective. And it was great that it was being live streamed and people could watch it and share the link with friends and family. And I'll end with an apology in some sense, because I'm extremely behind on my emails right now. So if anyone has sent me anything and I haven't responded, the past 2 months has been an exercise with spring cleaning and on hyperdrive, because my family moved out of our house into an apartment, and decluttering was a bit of a disaster. So we're still trying to unpack. We're renovating our house and kind of living in a small place. I hope to take advantage of midwinter break to fully catch up. And I hope everyone here also takes advantage of the midwinter break to get some much needed rest and recovery. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Koo. And for my report, overlaps a little bit with my colleagues, so I won't be redundant there. But a few things that were on my schedule since the last meeting, the last board meeting, was I attended the Belmont City Council meeting, and they had an interesting discussion on Belmont's new districting that they're going through. And it was interesting to hear what's happening and how that's progressing. And I'll be interested to hear a little later on in the agenda more information about that, and recommend anyone who's a resident of Belmont to educate yourself and learn more about it and what's going on and get involved, so your voice can be heard as well. Along those lines, in my role as a member of the San Mateo County Committee on School District Organization, at our last meeting, we discussed another districting process for the San Mateo County Office of Education trustees areas. Of course, every 10 years we do a census, and with the census, the population changes, so they need to look at the areas to make sure they're balanced. And since 10 years ago, of course, things have changed quite a bit. And the different trustee areas may have a lot of the numbers are very divergent. They're not equal populations in each trustee area. And what's interesting is Belmont-Redwood Shore and the trustee areas are aligned with the school district, at least the K-8 school district boundaries. So Belmont-Redwood Shores is actually part of Cabrillo and La Honda Pescadero school districts, which are both coastal, and we're kind of near the bay water, not the ocean water. So it's interesting, and we're actually an island where we're not contiguous. So the new proposed maps are showing a contiguous plan where actually the area one, which we are in, we will absorb part of Foster City, And we'll also have a path through Crystal Springs Reservoir to make it a contiguous plan. But they're still open for discussion. If anyone has any feedback, of course, provide it to the SMCOE. And feel free to go to the SMCOE website to see the proposed maps at this point. But that is ongoing. I also, some other things I attended was the school force meeting. I was happy to hear that thanks to the efforts of all the volunteers on the school force team, they're raising much needed funds for the district, and they're on track, but the race is not over. Being on track means we still have to get across the finish line. So you know, everyone feel generous about donating to the school force as the year progresses. And it was announced that on April 8th will be the annual event, and hopefully it will be in person this year. And everyone knows how much I like the annual event. So looking forward to that. And finally, I did attend some brown bags and heard some great insights, as my trustees did, my colleagues did. And one of the things that some of the teachers talked about was the struggle they've been going through, as you know, not everyone has been able to attend class. I mean, people have gotten sick or quarantined, and they wouldn't be, and it's been a struggle to juggle around. And the teachers have done, and teachers and staff and administrators and everyone helping out and juggling things around. They've done a Herculean effort to make sure our kids are monitored and educated. And personally, I want to give my thanks out to everyone who's really done a difficult job to balance that out. So, and the good news is that the case count steadily, every week it comes down, down, down. So, you know, I'm going to hope things continue, but hopefully we're through the worst of it, and we'll get through the rest of the school year in good shape. And with that, I'm going to move on to item number 8, which is a superintendent's report.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by saying thank you for accommodating me virtually today and accommodating my requirement to be virtual. A couple of things I just want to talk about today. I'm going to go ahead and start with kind of the COVID update, if you will. I will say we started January with 155 cases the first week back. Last week we had 14. So it's nice to see that trend is declining pretty significantly. At the county right now, the RF rate, or the transmission rate, is 0.59, which is great. It was much higher early on. We're glad to see that coming down. That said, our positivity rate is still 9.5%. So definitely work to be done, but our numbers are coming down, which is a great sign that we're starting to move from the pandemic to the endemic. And the state is definitely signaling this shift with masking guidance coming on the 28th for schools, and just openly general guidance right now. We've seen those changes this week. Countywide, when we look at vaccinations, just countywide, we're significantly higher, but right around 60% of 5 through 11-year-olds have received both doses. Just over 80% of 12 to 15 have received both doses. Remember, that's the average countywide. When we look locally at our adults and our full population, we're approaching the 100% mark of vaccination. So know that our youth vaccination is significantly higher than that countywide average. When we look in district, I will share with families, right now our vaccination survey that we put out in January, we're showing 58% of our students have registered their vaccination with the district. I can guarantee we're much, much higher than that. But at this point, we have 42% of our students without information on file. So Director Simon, our Director of Technology, will be pushing that survey out again tonight to remind families to upload and update their information. And we'll send a reminder again to get that updated. That information is going to be very important as we plan how to address changes as CDPH changes their guidance. So please get that updated as soon as possible. In preparation for midwinter break, the district purchased through iHealth individual testing boxes, antigen testing boxes for students and staff as they leave on Thursday and Friday. So tomorrow and Friday, we'll be distributing one box to every student. There's 2 tests in those boxes. We're going to ask families not to use them before going to visit family and friends, or to double check when we're at grandma's, but to really save those tests for when we return. We know families are going to be having fun midwinter break, likely increased exposure. We want to prevent what happened when we came back from winter break. So the idea of those 2 tests is students should take the test Monday morning before coming to school with enough time to read those tests. If they're positive, stay home. If they're negative, come on back to school. And then the second test should be used on Wednesday, again, 2 days later. Again, just another verification. As we know that once we're exposed, it typically takes 3 to 5 days until symptoms arrive. The earlier we can head it off, the better we are as a community for keeping our students safe. So those tests were purchased by BRSSD for BRSSD students. I know there's a lot of concern out there about masking. Honestly, I think our community has very diverse opinions about what the appropriate next steps are. We've been following CDPH guidance, and we will continue to evaluate that guidance and follow it as appropriate for our district. Just look for that information. But no, it does take us a bit of time to respond as we're still uncertain what that guidance will be. We want to make sure that we're continuing to keep our employees and our students safe as we make any transitions. And then finally, I'll end with a couple of celebratory things as well. Our trustees mentioned the VEX robotics. 2 teams kind of stand out. The little fuzz bots, I understand, won the judges award, and the cherry bombs won the excellent award. And both teams definitely get an A+ for their creative team name. So kudos to all of our robotics teams at Sandpiper. I just want to say thank you also to our board members. As I've heard you talk about everything that's happened, and I say this every time, we really do a lot in our district, and our board members are participating in so many different aspects of leadership within our district. And I just want to thank you for always being involved and continuing to highlight the great things that happen district-wide in BRSSD. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Superintendent Gara. Moving on to item number 9, speakers wishing to address the board. The public has a right to address the board on any agenda item or non-agenda item within the jurisdiction of the board. To do so, please submit a speaker card to Ms. Ellinger and noting the agenda item if applicable. Non-agenda items, non-agenda comments, we will hear now. Agenda-related comments, we will hear during that item's discussion. The public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. In fairness to all, we ask everyone to respect the time limit. If addressing the board on a non-agenda item, please be aware that the provisions of the Brown Act prohibit the board from acting or discussing such matters at this meeting. Ms. Ellinger, I have one card already. Are there any additional speakers?
That is it for tonight.
Okay, then this one is on item number 14, so we will hold that comment for that agenda item. And moving to item number 10, approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Since we have a comment on item number 14, I would recommend that so we can let the speaker respect their time this evening, I would suggest we put that in between item number 11 and 12. Is there any other, are there any other modifications to the agenda or consent agenda? If not, can I hear a motion to?
I think, was there a minor update to the?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I was struggling to hit the unmute. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Trustee Koo. There was just one minor update. It was in language. Trustee Koo shared at the school force board meeting the goal of creating a pipeline of school force board members. We just misorganized the words there. We'll correct that.
I move for approval of the agenda and consent agenda as modified.
My second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes with 4 ayes and 1 absence. Okay, moving on, we have item number 11, and we have the privilege of having the Honorable Belmont City Council Member Charles Stone and Assistant City Manager Eric Engelbert to present information regarding the districting in the city of Belmont. Councilmember Stone, the floor is yours.
Good evening, President Linebaugh, board members. Nice to see you all, and Superintendent Iguara virtually. We wanted to take a few minutes, not too many on your agenda, just to give you an update on how things are going with our district elections process, to thank you for helping us with outreach. I know the superintendent has put it in his weekly update, and I would ask that each of you please work your networks to make sure that folks in Belmont know this is happening. As you all know, it's really hard to get people's attention about something unless it's right on their doorstep. So in July of last year, we got a letter from a lawyer named Kevin Schenkman that accused the city of Belmont of having at-large elections that violated the California Voters' Rights Act. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of legal jargon. At the end of the day, many municipalities and school districts get these letters, and the way that the law is written, it's almost impossible to prevail as a municipality or a school district. So when you get the letter, your decision point is, do we take a chance like the city of Santa Monica did and get hit with $28 million in attorney's fees? Or do we listen to our lawyers who tell us there's no chance of winning, even though, you know, there really isn't a huge problem here, we would still lose. You've got to take action. You take action. So we are halfway through our process already, believe it or not, which is one of the reasons I'm here today. Our public hearing schedule was January 11th, January 25th, February 8th. We have 2 meetings left, February 22nd, and on March 8th will be our final vote. So the public can draw maps using a tool called District R. If you simply go to the City of Belmont website, on our banner will be something about district elections. You can click on it. You can Google Belmont district elections. I just tried it while I was sitting in the audience. It'll come up right away. We encourage the public to draw maps. Maps can be based on all kinds of things, but one of the things is something referred to as communities of interest. In some cities, that would refer to a lot of different things. In our city, it could be school boundaries. For instance, could be a community of interest. Areas of certain faith groups are considered communities of interest. We don't have a lot of that. I should back up. One of the initial decision points you are confronted with when you get this letter is, do we want to go to all districts or a directly elected mayor and larger districts? For us, we have 5 council members, so it would be 4 districts and a mayor, or 5 districts and the rotating system of mayor that we currently have. We actually decided to go with the directly elected mayor for a number of reasons. I don't know when that's going to first happen, whether it will be this year or in 2024. That's something we'll figure out later. Right now, we're in the map drawing portion of this. We want the public to draw as many maps as possible. Trust me, people are looking at them. It's unfortunate and there's no way around it, but the consultant draws a couple of maps at the outset. If you visit our website, it'll appear that those maps sort of have the imprimatur of the consultant or the city. And that's not necessarily the case. They're just kind of conversation starters right now. And don't let anyone tell you that those are the maps, those are going to be the maps, or they're even necessarily a launching point. You can draw whatever you want. So I think that's about it. This is obviously a pretty big change. Folks have gotten used to a system with our school board and our city council where we have at-large elections for literally ever in Belmont, and that's going to change. I am trying to mitigate as much as possible the alarms that are going to go off in people's head when they get that first ballot. And unfortunately, I don't think we can completely do it, but we want to do as much outreach as possible. So the first time someone hears about this is not when they open their ballot this November. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Eric will handle the heavy lifting. By the way, this is our new assistant city manager, Eric Engelberg. In my time on the city council, we've never had an assistant city manager, so this is a big thing for us, and he's taking a lot of load off of our city manager already. His hair has gotten less white. He's got a new itch in his step. It's awesome. So you guys will probably see him around, and I'm sure he'll be working on some school stuff as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Do we happen to have any special groups of interest in Belmont?
One of the interesting things is we kept asking the consultants what the communities of interest were. And finally, we got a good answer at the last meeting, which was, we're waiting for you to tell us. So, which was a little less than satisfactory to me, but now I understand the process. The short answer is communities of interest is an incredibly vague term. It could be, like I said, if we were in a community where there was a really concentrated population of Jewish people someplace, it could be that. We don't have that here. It could be school boundaries. It could be topography. And that's what at the last meeting, we suggested to the consultant that our topography is a little more different than a lot of communities across the United States. And we kind of coalesced around the idea of a west, east, and 2 central districts, because the flatlands sort of share some characteristics and challenges and opportunities, and the hills share certain things, and being up against the wildlife urban interface, for example. And then, the central areas, Chula Vista, Alameda, Cipriani, they tend to share some traits and characteristics as well. So that's kind of one way we're thinking about communities of interest, but it really is a broad term, right, Eric? I mean, it can be any number of things. I'll tell you one thing, this is interesting. Despite the fact that the allegation that gets us to this point is that we have some sort of racially polarized voting as a result of at-large elections, one thing you cannot consider when drawing district lines is race or ethnicity. So that's kind of counterintuitive, I would say, yeah. But that's where we are. So if you're sensing that this is a little bit of a strange process, it is. And it's not just us, because I've talked to folks who went through this in San Mateo and other places before us, and they all found it strange, cumbersome, and clunky. And then there's a time requirement as well. If this all ever comes your way, just know that it is a sprint. We got the letter in July. The lawyer was nice enough, because we went on hiatus for August, to give us a little extra time. But essentially, we started this process in earnest in January, and we're voting on the final maps in March. And the reason for that is because we have to do it in time to get the information to the state by April, when the deadline is, so that they can have this all ready to go for November. That was a long answer to a question that probably gave you a lot more than you're looking for.
No, it was helpful. The follow-up I have is twofold. One is, do you anticipate any challenges with the districting approach in terms of filling seats? And along those lines, as the districting lines are pulled, is it possible that any of the current city council members might be in the same district, that as those districts lines are pulled, how do you roll them out in a way that you're able to pull in from the electorate to fill those seats?
So a couple things. First answer is, I asked this question early on because, as I think all of you know, there was a time not that long ago when this board was filled by somebody who simply walked on because no one ran. And we know that it's very hard to recruit people to run for office. I salute you all for doing it. I hope you salute me for doing it. We're all in the trenches together. None of us are in it for the money, I tell you that for sure, because there is none. The answer is, if somebody doesn't run in a district, the council would then appoint somebody from that district. The next question I ask, which no one really has an answer to, which is, what if nobody applies for the appointment? And I think the answer is probably just like it would be if we had a vacancy and we needed an appointment and no one applied. You're going with 4 till the next election. So I hope that neither of those scenarios happens. I want to believe that we as a community, and that includes all of you, will make sure that we make people aware of this and encourage folks to get involved and to run so that we don't have that situation arise. Second question, the other thing we cannot consider, this is even more, there are some ways that race and ethnicity can come into it a little bit, but it's not a deciding factor. One thing that is verboten is we cannot look at where any council members live when drawing the lines. Cannot consider incumbency. Absolutely no. We would get into huge trouble. In answer to your question, yes, it is extraordinarily likely that some council members will be drawn into the same district. In fact, now that we have the maps and I've looked at the data, there are 2 council members who live in the same precinct. You cannot split precincts as part of this process. So those 2 council members will end up in the same district for sure, no matter what. The next question is staging, and that's the last thing we deal with, I think. So after we develop the districts and finalize a map, then the next question and the final question we have to answer is, when do these elections take place, right? And in San Mateo, it was so fraught with uncertainty and worries about different things that in the end, guess what they did to decide one of the districts when it would go? They flipped a coin.
Awesome.
They flipped a coin. And I don't fault them for that because they thoroughly debated the issue. There were a number of good points made by everyone. There were pros and cons to both ways, and that was the only way they could do it. So that, and then after we finish that, then we'll look at the directly elected mayor, and when that goes out, that'll be the completion of the process.
So if I could,
Yeah, please.
just on the last comment you made in terms of the directly elected mayor, can you explain what was the process, or what factors did you consider in that decision versus going with just straight 5 areas?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll tell you is it didn't come about as I thought it would, because at our first meeting, we were basically told, oh, by the way, if you want to do a directly elected mayor, you sort of have to decide that at the outset, which makes sense now that I think about it, because it's a question of 4 or 5 districts, right? You can't ask them to draw a bunch of maps for 4 districts and for 5. They'd probably send you another bill for that. So that was kind of a surprise, even though we should have thought of that. This is a new process for us and nobody was quite considering that. So we kind of had to do it on the fly pretty quick over the course of a couple meetings. I can't speak for any other council member, but I can tell you how I look at it, which is when you go to districts, you increase the risk that there will be parochialism, right? In this town, maybe it's not as much of a risk, but it's still a risk. Certainly the folks who live east of El Camino sometimes have very different interests and ideas about development than the folks who live west of Alameda, for instance, right? So there's going to be some parochialism that naturally and organically arises. One way to mitigate against the effects of that parochialism is to have at least one person who represents the entire town and has to answer to everybody. Secondarily, we're a small town. We're 27,000 people. Despite the development, we haven't grown that fast. You know, to give you an idea, San Mateo is now the biggest city in the county, and I think it's 109,000 or something like that. We regionally have batted above, punched above our weight for the last 8 years. We're very lucky. And we've worked hard at getting representatives on the SamTrans board, the Caltrade board, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board, the San Mateo County Transportation Authority Board, and Davina Hertz serves on is a governor appointee on the California Air Resources Board. It's highly unusual for a town this size. If we want that to continue or have any chance of continuing, when you have a system where it's just 5 districts, each person's going to represent around 6,000 people. When you have a mayor that represents 27,000 people, well, now you're talking a little bit more in terms of gravitas. So for instance, San Mateo decided to go with 5 districts rather than a directly elected mayor. Our directly elected mayor will represent more votes than any of the district elected council members in the city of San Mateo. That's pretty good for a city our size. That that increases the chances that we will have a seat at the regional table. That's kind of how I looked at it. One of the things we did agree on early was that if we would go with the directly elected mayor, which we did, it would be 2-year terms. And one of the reasons for that is to protect against entrenched incumbencies. With a 4-year mayor, it's really hard to change things, right? So if you keep them on a 2-year leash, which is the best way I can put it, it's kind of a pain for that person who has to keep running every 2 years. But that's kind of the trade-off for the incumbency power that you add to the role. And the city of San Bruno, believe it or not, has been doing this for 3 decades. They are the only city in the county that has a directly elected mayor, and they're up for election every 2 years.
I have a question regarding the map drawing. Is it limited to Belmont voters only, or can anyone go in and draw a proposed map?
I don't know how we'd even know if you weren't a Belmont voter. Yeah, anyone.
Even
We, as you know, are a welcoming community. And we consider Redwood Shores, at least some of us named Charles, to be the land that should have been gone. We are one school community. Folks from Redwood Shores come here to use our amenities and shop and go to school. And we think of it as one community, even though technically we have no power over it, don't get the tax revenue from it. Anyway, I'm not bitter at all. So yeah, the short answer is just, yeah, I mean, folks can draw whatever they want, and maybe someone from outside of Belmont will come up with the perfect map. Who knows? We're more interested in the result rather than who's drawing.
And what's been kind of the level of feedback that you've gotten from the community so far?
I'd say the number one comment is, why are you idiots doing this? This is a perfectly good system. Why are you doing this? And then you have to, so one of the things we talked about at the last meeting is that we have to start every meeting, every outreach session with, here's the story from day one. We didn't want to do this. All 5 of us have expressed from the dais, we think this is a bad idea. Councilmember Hurt was actually in Scotland at the UN climate conference and sent her comments to the first meeting in a written form, and they were read. And I encourage you all to watch that meeting because they were some of the best comments I've ever heard about district elections. They were fantastic. That's the most often thing we hear. People are a little anxious about it, as they are with all change. I would say, if I had to guess, 95% of the people in town don't know this is happening. It's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. The schools are a great way of disseminating information. We need you to help us as a partner with that. I'm dreading the emails that are going to come after the November election when people are like, wait, what's going on here? This is the first I've heard about this. Is there a mailer that already went out?
There's information. A lot of this information has been distributed already.
Right. So there's a mailer that's out. City's pushing it on our social media channels, but I don't see anybody liking or commenting. And again, as you all know far too well, it is very hard to get people's attention when they're focused on a lot of other important stuff.
Well, I think on behalf of all of us, just want to express, thank you for sharing all this information. And we always appreciate your partnership And, we want to learn from you. Hopefully there's something we can do to help you and not just get out the word, but if, maybe there's some Redwood Shores folks who want to give some great ideas.
And I, just a word, so I just found out at the last meeting, I've been calling it the District R tool. It's Districtor, the mapping tool. And if you get frustrated the first few times, that's normal. Believe it or not, it is the best tool out there. I've tried some of the other ones that the county had. This is a better tool, but it can be a little frustrating and counterintuitive. You'll probably make a few mistakes. There's a button for drawing, there's a button for a hand for moving the map around, and there's a button for erasing. And then you can change how many precincts you paint with one stroke, right? So I would encourage folks to, if you're gonna sit down and do it, give yourself a half hour. This isn't something you're gonna sit down and do in 5 minutes.
Any other questions or? Yeah, I just follow up about that. I went on the website myself and tried out the mapping tool. It was a little tricky, but it was very interesting to see how it adds up the population so you can figure out the numbers. And it's a challenging process. As a parent of a student in the school district, at Central Elementary, our daughter went there and you got to know all the parents and you really got to know that group of people, and that became the people we know. And, I understand it's very hard to delineate some neighborhoods within Belmont. But I think a lot of parents have that feeling. But my understanding is that 2/3 of the residents or voters of Belmont do not have children. So they are not in that same. So I know it's going to be challenging for you. And I encourage everyone who has a chance to go to a map and give their opinions on what they think are the communities of interest that need to be recognized.
If I could just real quick, I did forget to, if I could mention our tabling events, our pop-up informational booth.
Yes.
Sorry, February 16th. Is that today?
Mhm.
Okay, well, we all could have been at Slice House this morning getting pizza and learning about district elections, but we weren't. Here we go. This is much better.
This Saturday.
Okay, so this Saturday at Twin Pines Senior Center is a big one. Also the 17th, tomorrow at the Belmont Sports Complex from 5 to 6. Downtown Safeway, which is the one on El Camino, tomorrow from 6:15 to 7:15. Starbucks Carlmont on the 18th from 8:30 to 9:30. Safeway downtown on the 18th from 9:45 to 10:45 a.m. And then we have a second chance at Slice House and Starbucks from 11 to noon on Friday as well. So if anybody wants to stop by and test out our pop-up and let me know how it's going, that'd be awesome.
Excellent. And I know the link to the website, to the city website, is in the agenda that people can click on to get to that. And while you're here, I just wanted to thank the city of Belmont for their cooperation in helping us to get the Ralston Field fixed up. So that's very much appreciated that got done. To help keep our students out of risk and have them a place to play, especially when they have to have masks on inside all the time. So that's appreciated. And as always, it's great to have a representative of the city here coming up to the school board to discuss issues and the cooperation and share information. I hope we can collaborate more like this. In fact, I'd like to offer in the future for maybe a district representative to come to the city council and present on how the state of the district is doing to share that with other residents who may not be so familiar with that. So we would love to offer that sometime in the
I love that idea. I'll pass it on to Mayor Mates.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for.
Is it line-
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
no worries. Councilmember Stone, I just want to say thank you. And I want to offer, if you'd like me to send out those meet and greet pop-ups, happy to do that and support you by getting that word out. As you also know, our district has started looking at districting as well. We had a presentation early in the fall on what it means and how we might move forward as a district. So we are looking to the city of Belmont to help pave that pathway as well. So whatever we can do to support. And again, thank you for that ongoing partnership.
Much appreciated. We have some information in several different languages that we're going to leave here in case folks are at the DO and want to grab it.
Great. Thank you.
Actually, I had an interesting idea too, that maybe we could have this as a middle school like challenge. Right? If you discuss it as a topic in the social studies class and say, hey, go and figure out an ideal map and do your research. Maybe that's an option too.
Great idea.
Well, I know my kids are smarter than me and for all of us, so that's not a bad idea at all.
Yeah, all these digital natives, they'll figure out that mapping tool.
They'll help us with it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so
Thank you very
much.
much.
Good to see you.
Okay, and next, we will adjust the schedule. We had talked earlier about moving up number 14. So we will start that, and we do have a public comment from Ms. Chandra McCune.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chandra. Hi, Dan. Tonight, I'm here in my role as BRSFA president. In case you didn't know, I inherited that job. I'm glad you all think it's funny. But tonight, you are going to get presented. You have in front of you the 2022-2023 calendar. And so I'm here tonight to thank a couple different groups of people. First, I want to thank the BRSFA members who, in a rather short turnaround time, both completed a survey on their interest for start dates and holidays and end dates and things like that, and then voted to ratify the calendar. And this all happened in about 12 to 15 days. So really appreciate that. I also really want to acknowledge our calendar subcommittee of Abe Rosas and Susan Hall, who have spent many hours over those last several days, weeks, putting this calendar together, working a lot with Julie and Annie, really to make sure that you had a calendar in front of you this evening. I know that there was some, where's the calendar? Where's the calendar? Our hands were tied waiting for Sequoia to get their calendar to us as we try to do our best to align to them. They are also ratifying their calendar tonight. So we're all going to be on the same page and have calendars to put out to our communities tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I just want to say,
BRSFA to provide feedback to the board. Yep. Superintendent DeGraw.
Thank you. I just want to say a big thank you to Chandra. Shonda is absolutely right. Julie and I reached out to BRSFA and I said, let's get it done. Can we push? And you know what? Our committees did an amazing job in a very short time frame because we know how important it is to our community to have that calendar in hand and plan for the summer. So just thank the BRSFA team immensely for their support. As Julie is going to share with you in a little bit, the calendars align pretty amazingly this year. There's some subtle differences, but all in all, it's more alignment, I think, than we've seen in a very long time. So I'll let Julie share the rest, but thank you, Chandra, for your effort and your support, and Abe and Susan, and then Julie on your side, you and definitely Annie. I know Annie was working hard to make sure that those final drafts were ready for us to review today. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chandra.
Ms. Eastburn.
Thank you. So Chandra and Dan made my job extremely easy tonight. Before I seek your approval for the calendar, I just want to echo what they said in that I very much appreciate the process and working with BRSFA, the relationships that we continue to build. They just keep getting stronger. And as Dan said, you know, he pushed a little hard. So in turn, I pushed a little hard and everybody responded. So what seems like really hard work when we're in the trenches really comes out to be something really positive, and especially for this calendar this year, how it aligns with Sequoia, and the start dates and the end dates are if not the same, one day off. The vacations are the same, if not one day off here and there. So I'm really proud of both sides. Thank you, Chandra, for representing your team, and Abe and Susan and my right-hand person, Annie, who I cannot do my job without. And thank you, Dan, for always pushing. We're all better for it. So before you is the 2022-23 instructional calendar for your approval.
I move
Like a night at the Oscars almost with all the thanks.
I'm getting good.
I move that we adopt the annual instructional calendar as developed by the Belmont-Redwood Shores School District and via our SFA, Belmont-Redwood Shores Faculty Association, as presented to us tonight.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Not, I'll call a vote. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the vote carries 4 ayes and 1 absence.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say one thing about this? I know everybody's saying thank yous, but I just want to say as a parent, huge thank you, because I think that, you know, when we have kids like I do in both districts, it's so appreciated that vacations are aligning and that, you know, we're not coming in a week early and a week late. And so just really appreciate all the collaboration. And it's been, you know, just wonderful to see you all come up with great products like this. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And I'm going to
Thank you.
echo.
I will just give a quick kudo to Sequoia. I reached out to Dr. Williams, who put me in touch with their calendar committee lead, who was open and sharing their dialogues and their works in progress. So I look forward to continuing those relationships as well. So thank you.
And one other comment I'll make while we're on the topic here, it was nice to, see Sequoia's alignment with this calendar. And also I noticed that Sequoia Union High School District has also proposed not only 22-23, but 23-24. And that always helps with planning ahead for everyone. So I would put it up there for the district to maybe consider, following that trend, but I will leave it at that. Any further comments from the board on this topic? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're getting back on track, which would be item number 12, which is our school spotlight, another installment of our favorite edition of learning how on each of our sites.
Come on up. We are lucky tonight to have Dr. DeWeese here to share with us all the wonderful things that make Cipriani Elementary School a special place. I'm just here to introduce her, and she's going to share with you everything about Cipriani.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Pugh. I'd like to start out this evening by actually echoing something that you said. And by the way, good evening, board. Good evening, Superintendent DeGuara. So delightful to be here tonight. I want to start out by saying a special thank you actually to Assistant Superintendent Hugh and Coordinator Kristen Sevilla. When I was out several weeks ago, I had to be out for 10 days with a positive COVID test and felt so supported by the district coming in and keeping Cipriani moving along as it should. And so I was very, very appreciative to you. So I wanted to give you a public shout out for that. Cipriani is a wonderful place to be. I'm blessed to be in my 3rd year there. I cannot say any of those 3 years have been what anyone would consider a normal school year. I'm looking forward, hopefully next year, to being somewhat more 180 days of students and teachers and all of us doing what we normally do in school. But, when can you ever say anything's normal in a school? So thank you all very much this evening for being here.
Nice one.
I have, in 2 years, there we go. Still not really mastered the glasses and mask thing. So you'll have to be a little patient with either mask or fog. So Cipriani has we've been having some struggles this year with particularly our younger grade students There's a lot of trauma with our younger children and also a lack of school readiness. We have really been struggling in kinder and first grade with some kids who are struggling to reintegrate into or to integrate for the first time into schools, kiddos who have not been able to have the benefit of having preschool experiences in the past. And so we've moved away from a narrowly defined focus on pure academics into a whole, and we've always been kind of a whole child school, but this has really highlighted the need to think about children as their whole beings. This picture of a first grade, move on here. This picture of a first grade student, these first grade students on the carpet in one of our teachers' classes kind of talks about how the whole child is so important. These children are working together to collaborate and to integrate their learning and thinking and academic language skills in order to kind of become more school ready. They're working collaboratively, discussing the contents of their reading, including how they connect the emotions in the content of their reading with the emotions that they're feeling about being in school and being safe. And then when you look at the upper corner, you see children who are engaged in a creative process, collaboratively working together to create a product together. And they're working on negotiation and creation of a project that is something that could not be done independently. These are skills that we're seeing our children don't really have as they're coming back into school this year. And I know in February, we should be further down this path. We are really working on this, but particularly for our younger children, this has been a struggle. Working very closely with Laura and Julie, we have been really discussing some of our children who have been more challenging, needed more supports, and I have felt very supported. Our staff has felt very, very supported by the district in these endeavors. So we've been very lucky in that regard to be part of a district that really puts students in the first focus. Project-based learning and engagement are also part of this picture, of course. We had a project-based learning situation that happened about a month ago that I don't have pictures of, but I want to talk a little bit about it because one of our third grade teachers took some of our TCI curriculum that is specifically around the human monument, and it is about the February, celebration of Black History Month and having students choose heroes that they really want to highlight. One of the students chose to talk about how she was really a disability rights advocate, and she has some personal experience about this. And so she took her personal experiences and with her little cohort, created a skit that she presented to her friends. So the teacher really encouraged kids to go beyond the TCI curriculum and make it a personal situation for them and relate it to their own personal experiences. So this really highlights the project-based learning aspect that's going on at Cipriani, how children take an essential question that's really important to themselves that they can discuss and kind of unthread with their peers to really think more deeply about and delve into, and then present to their other, the other children in the class. So this is a really wonderful opportunity for them. As far as engagement and more project-based learning, you see here first graders creating molecules. They got to make slime in order to do it, which was really fun. So that is it's an example of a very engaging activity that they got to work through. They got to name the parts of the molecules and create different atoms and so forth in this. And thanks so much to the mad scientists for coming in and helping us do this across the grade levels. That's been really fun. We also have in the center students who are looking at the habitat of the Bay Area and being able to explore and discover animals, birds, plants, life systems that they see typically in their day, but might not typically delve into without the specific opportunity to have it highlighted and discussed with their peers and their teachers and specialists. So these are things that at Cipriani have been really wonderful to see the kids really engaging with and being really excited about learning in a way that you don't see a lot of times in typical classrooms. We're also focusing on our international community. We have We have a wonderfully diverse international community at Cipriani. This is our fantastic librarian whom we share with Central, Nanette Nahar. And as I say all the time, I would rather have half of Nanette than all of another librarian. So sharing her is just fine. She and I have collaborated a lot on getting literature that reflects our diverse student population. These are 10 of the languages that are frequently heard and spoken at Cipriani. We did find that we did not have a rich offering of literature in our library that reflected our diverse community. And so that has been a focus of the school plan this year and last year, is devoting resources to enriching those particular offerings. And so Nanette has been very excited and kind of full speed ahead in getting books that, you know, the kids can discuss with their English only colleagues that we are reading together, as well as having our children, particularly our Russian children. We have had a huge influx of Russian children, which has been very interesting. So now that they're able to discuss books together that they are reading in their home languages, which has been a lot of fun. This is a terrible slide, and my apologies for it. I know better. But what I really want to highlight is the fact that universal design for learning really supports students learning and demonstrating their knowledge in a variety of ways and becoming expert learners. So here you see, the picture should be a little bit bigger, I'm sorry, but you see a first grade student who's actually teaching her class how to calculate by tens and ones. She's leading the class. The teacher is nowhere in this picture. The child was doing a fantastic job. She was fielding questions from the kids. She was moving the tiles around. She was having a great time doing it, truly demonstrating what an expert learner is. In order to foster this kind of learning at Cipriani, we have focused our evaluation process on the CSTPs that are in alignment with universal design for learning. That's CSTP 1.4, using a variety of instructional strategies and resources and technologies to meet students' diverse learning needs. In other words, we want to give the students every opportunity to both gain and demonstrate the knowledge that they have. It's not write an essay. It's not solve the equation. It's what do you think about this math? What do you think about? How do you resolve this? How can you come at this problem in many different ways? How can you explain it to one another? How can you come together collaboratively and have an academic conversation about your thinking about whatever this problem is? CSTP 2.6 is employing classroom routines, procedures, norms, and supports for positive behavior to ensure a climate in which all students can learn. So this is talking about your learning environment and your ability to create an environment, particularly, as I was saying earlier, in a situation where so many of our kids are not, they do not have those school readiness skills, excuse me, and they have not had a lot of experience with formal time in school buildings, even preschools. A lot of these first grade students have never been actually in physical school buildings until this year. And CSTP 3.6, addressing the needs of English learners and students with special needs to provide equitable access to the content. That is a particular area of passion for me. And I personally feel, and I know this is very trite, but rising tide lifts all boats. And so the better we do for all of our students with diverse needs, the better all of our students are going to do. Also highlighting that diverse students also add to the richness of the learning environment. Am I speaking too fast? Any questions so far? Sorry. Okay, kind of along the same theme, reintegrating students back into school after they've either been absent from school due to the pandemic in a hybrid learning situation. We have had some challenges with actual attendance as well, even going into this year, even in the last month. We are really trying to reintegrate our students so that we are a whole school community again. Some of the steps we have taken, Molly Henricks from the San Mateo County Office of Education, we have been working with her. A lot of the schools have been working with her. She's a fantastic resource to talk about trauma-informed practices. it was interesting to me because she worked with our staff, PD Day last month. And what I had really been thinking about and kind of focusing on was trauma-informed practices for the children. And she came in and really made us think about ourselves and how we have needs as a school staff. And it's kind of the, who's the person you have to rescue first in a rescue situation? And it's definitely the teachers, right? The teachers are the people who are there first and foremost with our kiddos. So she talked a lot about self-care for the teachers, and that's been really important. She's also worked with my staff and myself personally with some of our more challenging cases for our little kids. She's been fantastic. So she's been a great, great resource. Self-care for staff, I kind of touched on. Our school counselor, Katarina Cook, I cannot say enough about. We do share her with Fox. Again, rather have half of Katarina than all of pretty much anything else. She's been amazing. She's done some friendship lunch bunches. She's started an art cart. She's really helped us out with identifying some students with higher needs. She's been critical in identifying students that we might not have seen, who might not be quite so front and center as far as seeing their needs and really addressing the needs that are underlying, particularly with some attendance questions. School Force mini grants have also really focused on this integration process of getting kids back re-engaged with school. Again, Katarina with art cart, she's out there at lunchtime whenever she's at our school. Kindergarten and first grade have both started gardens, which really involve the kids in a lot of aspects of science, writing, hands-on learning activities, project-based learning. That's been a really, really fun and ongoing project that actually started last year, but that's an ongoing support from School Force. School-wide materials, and I won't go into the long list of this, to support focus and independence within our schools for all of our kids. Math centers at fourth grade to foster differentiation and hands-on learning. So really helping those kids, again, become independent learners, work collaboratively with one another so that the teacher can step back and let the kids take charge of their learning. That's been wonderful. We've got an expansion of the chicken incubators to hatch our little darling chicks, which the kids love. And fifth grade is doing a cross-curricular science and writing project that's combining learning about the solar system with elaboration in their informational writing, as well as creating models, writing about one another's models, talking to one another about their models. It's been a wonderful project. So these are just a few examples of how the mini grants have been used to foster this reintegration of kids into the schools. Sorry. Okay. I wanted to, and I'm not going to read this to you. These are our 3 school goals on our school plan. All 3 school goals are very important, but I wanted to highlight that goal 2 in particular are aligned with our focus on whole child and engaging and integrating students. Goal 3 also celebrates our community as a whole, including our parents, our school board, having a whole school community. That has been something that for me, having worked in a variety of different settings over the last 20 years, it's very unique to Cipriani that the school community is all participating to support our children. So that's been very important. So questions and comments? I feel like I did that like an auctioneer, sorry.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up for questions.
Gwendolyn, what would you say is your biggest challenge at the site? And what would you say is your biggest success right now?
Challenges, we are really working hard. And again, thank you to the district so much for partnering and collaborating with us. We really are working hard with a particular group of younger students to help them be school ready. And it has been very challenging. I know that these children are going to be very successful because we have such a wonderful community and district. And that you might say is part of the success story as well. As I look at students that, and I've only been with the school for 3 years, but who also had lots of challenges when they were young, not the kind of challenges that our youngest kids have now, obviously, because the circumstances are different. But I think because it is such a strong community and such a strong staff. We are huge advocates for our children. And that is really important. Successes, we have a really strong staff. We have a very stable staff. We have some very, very, very veteran folks balanced out by some really, really young folks. And I think it's great to see how they can come together. I like to joke about our 5th grade team because it was initially Pamela and Bree, and now it's Pamela, Bree, and Justine, and I call them PB and J. They all just, work together so well. So it's a great place to be. It's a great team to be on, and everyone is very focused on students. So that would be the success. Thanks.
And then my follow-up question to that is, if you had one wish for a way that we could support you better, what would that be?
Katarina full-time. No question. She's an integral part. I know she's an integral part of Fox as well, because Mike Pappas and I have talked about it as well. It has been such a benefit to have this strong person who really wants to be and is qualified to be a school counselor, and that is her desire. It's not, I want to get to be a counselor. I want to go there. I want to, it is who she is in her heart and soul. And my impression from talking to my colleagues, the other principals, the other counselors who are in place are also equally valued and valuable. So thank you so much to Laura and Julie and Jinpei and Kristen Sophia for identifying and getting these folks on staff. They've been amazing. More. You asked.
Right. Appreciate it.
The younger children you mentioned who are having trouble adjusting to in-person school or to school in general, do you attribute that almost entirely to the pandemic, or are there other factors at play?
There are, of course, other factors. Each child is an individual. And of course, and I'll give you I can't discuss individual children with you. But, we have children with some really different kind of circumstances, and those circumstances, to generalize, have perhaps been exacerbated by the situation of the last couple of years. Unemployment, transientness, a lot of factors that have caused people's perhaps personal habits to not be as positive as they might have been, that might have impacted some of our kids. We also just have some kids who have not had the benefit of the school readiness that most of our children normally do. So we have a hugely advocative staff, so that's a good thing. And we are going to put everything in place we can to help these children be successful and their families. It's not just the child, it's the whole community around the child.
Right. And just to clarify, the reason I was asking is to try to address the problem and come up with a solution. Then you have to understand, obviously, what are the factors that are contributing to the issue, right? So if it's mostly pandemic related, then you would hope that some of those exacerbating factors would then mitigate over time, right? As we're moving into more of an endemic stage. But if there are underlying factors that are outside of the pandemic or that would exist even without there have been a pandemic, then those, and I know you're addressing those needs too, and I'm not asking for individual cases, but are you seeing some trends in that regard? Because then that would help you to address those factors as well.
Absolutely. And what I believe you're talking about are wraparound services. And that, in a district this small is a little bit more challenging than I found it in districts in the East Bay. They're larger. I've worked in districts where there are social workers on staff. Fortunately, this district comes together to, we don't have a social worker that we can go to and say, gosh, I really need your help with this. But, Julie and Laura have been really helpful with this kind of thing. And everyone does come together to identify the needs and how we can address them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a follow-on question with all the different language books and different languages spoken. So when you're talking about those story times where, the child might lead a story or reading in their native tongue, is that happening in the library, in the classrooms? And what has the reception been for other kids who are experiencing that?
So we are not, so the stories are being read in English,
Oh,
to
okay.
be clear.
Okay.
As much as I would love to have stories read in other languages, and that's a wonderful, actually, suggestion. The stories are read in English. Children are given the opportunity to discuss stories that are from their heritage. But my focus right now is to make sure that a student, we have several students right now who are predominantly Russian speakers and other languages as well. Russian was just a little bit of a surprise to me. That they have rich offerings that they can read in their own language as well. So I think that's really important.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Because at first I thought you meant that the child was actually reading it in their native tongue.
That's a really interesting thought, actually, Amy.
I was like, wow, how does that work and how do people receive it?
Yeah, not just an immersion school, but like a quad immersion school.
Well, it's kind of like, half the battle is even recognizing what language it is, even if you don't fully understand it. But if you can recognize enough of the nuances to know, oh, that's Russian. Oh, that's French. Right. That's kind of interesting.
Well, and it's interesting because we do have, a fairly significant handful of kids who speak Russian. So we are able to, get them together so they can form a community. We have 5 little girls in 5th grade who speak Portuguese. Just kind of happened that way. It's interesting. None of them started with us as littles. So it's kind of an interesting growth process. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing, the growth and the highlights of your school. And I was looking at the one slide with the 3 goals on it, and I like those 3 goals. I mean, the first 2 are really student focused, but the third one was interesting because it's encouraging the voice of all stakeholders, which is so important. And I'm glad you're, looking broadly to get feedback on how things are going and how things can improve. But I also know sometimes a few voices can overpower some other voices. So I'm wondering if you have any challenges with not getting everyone's feedback or any techniques you have to make sure that all voices are heard regardless of how vocal they are.
So thanks and good night. No, I'm kidding. No, that's always been a challenge in every school for which I've worked. Cipriani is a different community, obviously. I have encouraged a lot, and I will just be very transparent and say a lot of the communication this year has not been in-person communication or even live via Zoom. It's been, would you look at this, document over email? Can we collaborate in that way? And I think that actually is giving some of our parent community a little bit more voice, because folks who would not tend to speak up as much in an in-person meeting like this can have an opportunity to kind of process different things when we're talking about school goals, when we're talking about expenditures, things of that nature, give them an opportunity to ask me questions, individually, rather than kind of taking the risk of speaking up and maybe not being as comfortable in a group setting. So that's something I hope we will continue. We were actually today talking about in principals meeting that we're going back to much more in-person kind of communication. But I want to take a lesson from this last year and a half of making sure that people have the opportunity to not just participate like this, but also I'm going to send you the documents ahead of time so that you have a lot of time to think about them, send me back your questions so that we can address them when we are meeting together as a group.
And I appreciate your flare of color there.
Somebody asked me where I got this the other day and I said, it was in my desk. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you, Superintendent Gar. Any other comments or?
No, I just want to say thank you, Gwendolyn, for all your effort, for your support. Leadership through COVID is not easy. It's been a challenge for us all. I appreciate you stepping up, leading your school. helping our students that are struggling the most, making sure that they're on track, but really building your school and on your school goals to make sure that we all come through our challenges on the right side and supported and proficient. So I will say just kudos. I know the library focus and the book focus. There's an amazing library at Cipriani that has beautiful big doors that open, and your librarian takes all of her kiddos under her wing, and reads to them. It's just a wonderful, lovely environment for kids to grow and thrive there. So thank you very much for your support. It is sincerely appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thanks for spending your evening with us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Okay, and on to item number 13, which is the local control and accountability plan, which is back to the old LCAP. So
Hello, it's me again. All right, we're gonna give you, I'm just opening up my slides because I can never remember what I have in there. And now I figured out how to use technology to help me. We're gonna talk about the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan. This is something that you are used to hearing me do every June, where I go through and give you a report on every single action item, what we have spent, what we budgeted, what we actually spent, and why there's a discrepancy. That's usually that giant document. You've read the report and seen the individual items. I'm going to give you a quick overview today. This is a new requirement from the state to do a mid-year update to our stakeholder community. It is part of our communication process and part of our reflection process to ensure that as our principals work through their site councils and look through both this year's plan and planning for next year, they think about budgeting their dollars and utilizing their dollars and spending their dollars on a regular basis, okay? So we're gonna look at a couple of different components. This is a review. This is not a new document. This is a screenshot of our budget overview for parents that you approved in our June meeting, so we can see where the breakdown is. Basically, what I did with this information was go through line by line for every single action item for each of our three goals. Remember, our three goals are conditions of learning, culture and climate, and engagement. With each one of these, there are close to about 100 action items. We have the action item listed, when it should be occurring, what the budget amount was, and where we are thus far. Some of our more consistent items that have to do with salary, that have to do with personnel, are tracking exactly as we expected. They're a little bit past 50% because we had a slight increase in rate salaries this year, but ultimately we're about 50% of the year. We've spent about 50% of what we budgeted. The other items that we are noticing are not tracking as we had hoped are a lot of things that have to do with professional development and teacher release due to a number of factors. So this first one, this is just a screenshot of two items. So you'll see for both of those items, we are tracking in terms of the stipends and the predictability. The teacher-wide leaders is a good example of why we are not halfway through. I had set aside not only money for the teacher stipends, that's what that dollar amount is. We pay half in January and half in June. We have not spent any of our professional development money that I had set aside because we just don't have substitutes. And we also don't want to be exposing this. Just lost battery, maybe working. It's not working. Can you click forward, please? Between Delta and Omicron, we have not wanted to expose people, and in-person learning isn't happening in terms of different conferences. So there's a lot of expenditures that have not taken place thus far. Our site councils are looking at their site level expenditures and their budgets and making adjustments at the individual level. This time of year is typically when most of the expenditures happen because there's a little bit of getting going, getting started. And then we sign contracts and we get invoices later on. So I know, for example, Redwood Shores in the budget right now looks like they've spent nothing on their PD, but in fact, they have encumbered almost all of their professional development dollars through different contracts It has not been expended yet because the invoice hasn't come in, although the contractors have delivered part or all of their work. So there's a little billing lag as well. The big key takeaways at this point in the year are that we aren't spending as much. Like I was just saying, a lot of it has to do with the money that principals and I set aside to release teachers during the workday to do collaboration. They are finding ways to collaborate after school in smaller chunks and then paying them for, the $30 an hour rate. But that doesn't add up quite as much as $200 per teacher per day. So again, there are expenditures in most of our line items, just not at the level we would hope for. This is something that we'll review with our principals in our, continuing meetings. Rui meets with them regularly. I meet with them regularly to say, hey, this is your LCAP. Here's your budget. You're spending money. There are also some adjustments being made in the mid-year report. There is no place to say this line item is a $0 amount because we have reallocated the funds. That will come in June. You'll be able to see some of the shifts that are made because in the end, the LCAP is a living document. The principals look at their local LCF allocation, March, April, May, June, and then we take it to the board to be approved. And then the reality sets in after we look at the data, after we look at how kids come back, after we look at the reality of what's happening on the ground, and adjustments are made August, September, October. And then some of the planned items don't happen, but other items do. We haven't gotten to that yet, but you will see new things in June when I do the annual update for the full 2021. No, 21-22. Okay. One of the other pieces as part of the mid-year review, you have the actual document with all of my metrics in there that shows you where we are. All of our student metrics on the academic data are actually showing fairly strong. We're going to go through some specifics in a moment. But just like we talked about in the fall, surprisingly or not surprisingly, our students are doing on the whole what we would expect in terms of reading, writing, math skills. We really are paying more attention to the bigger picture in the whole child. The social emotional learning supports are being heavily utilized. You heard Dr. Dewey speaking earlier. The number one, I think, most appreciated new support that we have in place right now is our counselors. They are running activities at lunchtime. They are proactively looking at the Sabres, My Sabres data. They are following up with student groups. They are identifying whom to work with based off of teacher input through data collection, such as the Sabres, My Sabres, as well as the MTSS preliminary SST process. So they are also utilizing Character Strong. The counselors are using Character Strong as an add-on curriculum, whereas the teachers use Second Step. Something that Kristen will be leading this spring is a formalized look into our curriculum. We adopted Second Step quite a while ago. There's been a new update. There's just curriculum changes, needs change. So she will be working with the counselors and pulling together basically an adoption committee to evaluate where we are with Second Step and Character Strong. Do the two programs supplement one another really nicely, or are they a little bit redundant and should we pick one over the other so that we can move forward and adjust again based off of the needs of our students and our staff in response to our SEL. What we have here is a snapshot in time. Now we have pretty good participation, but I pulled this last week and the data were due on the 7th. So there's always some lagging indicators and staff who have done the assessments, but have not input the data. I will be sending a reminder out because this data, these data points are actually what we will be using to determine who qualifies for summer school. So we can send out invitations early. Another piece that I can update you on in our weekly write-ups. But you will see what I did for you was I put side by side our fall scores versus our winter scores. The red, yellow, green, blue matches our CSTPs, red being, not CSTPs, our SBAC performance levels, red being performance level 1, not meeting standards, 2 being approaching standards or yellow, 3 is the green, which is meeting standards, and 4 being exceeding standards. So the difference, so on the left, it's Fountas and Pinnell. Every month that we do that we administer the assessment, the benchmarks are set by time of year. So the fall expectations are different than the winter expectations. So for my child to be in exceeds in the fall, that's over 60% of our population. To 70% of the population being in exceeds means that all of those kids continue to progress. So maybe depending on your grade level, fourth grade, you start at R in the fall, fourth grade or fifth grade. Fifth grade, you start at R. By January, you should be at an S. So in order to be advanced, that means I started above R. I probably started at an S, and I didn't just stay at an S. I progressed to a level T. Okay. So you can see that there's quite a bit of growth. The nice thing to see, not only are the kids in the blue, those exceeding standards, growing, the kids that are in the red, that population is shrinking. That means our kids are moving from being behind at the end of the year to approaching now. So no, they're not at grade level yet, but they are making progress faster than what would be expected. Because if they started and continued at their learning rate, if I started in the yellow and continued at my learning rate and progress, I would still be in the yellow. To go from yellow to green is faster than what your annual progress would be. On the right-hand side, we have the math progress. This is a little bit different because we have an end of year math assessment that we give 3 times of the year in grades 3, 4, and 5. I aggregated the data for you to see where we are. We expect the bulk of our kids to be in the red, not meeting standards in the fall, because they are the year's standards. This is what I'm going to learn this year. We still started the year with almost 30% of our kids approaching end of year expectations. I mean, that's insane to me. But the key to look at is how much the red is shrinking. And not only is the yellow growing and the green growing, the blue is growing. That means across the grade levels, 3, 4, and 5, and we have close to 80% of the scores in here already. I'm really missing 3 classrooms and a handful of kids who are absent. So actually, that's probably closer to 90% of our 95%. We have 40+% of kids meeting or exceeding end of year grade level standards in math in grades 3, 4, and 5. So yes, they're coming with a little bit more difficulty, is a little bit more time to adjust, but yes, they are learning and they're progressing. This is the SEL screener. This is a new product that we purchased this year. Remember, we talked about it in the fall. It is the SABRS. It's a social, academic, emotional behavior rating scale. One thing to pay attention to when I made the smart chart in Excel, it's out of 100%, but notice that the table starts at 82. So 0 to 89% of our kids are experiencing low to no risk. So that difference between the SABRS, which is the teacher perspective on the left, and my SABRS, the student perspective, is actually 1%. It's a difference between 98% and 99%. So it's important to note that. There is a difference. What our counselors did after the first administration window, we actually sat in this room together. We looked at all the data. They teased apart every individual student and looked who in the My SABRS was showing up as having high risk. And were there any kids on that list that were not already on their radar? They did find 1 or 2 that they then followed up with, like the data. I mean, that's the whole point of the data, right? The counselors looked at the data, they triaged, and they followed up with the students. They also looked at all of those kids in the yellow to look at, is it a grade level span? Is it classroom span? Is it particular teacher? Not the teacher, but the kids in the classroom. They then followed up by planning with their principal how they would use their time in their tier 2 interactions. So they continue to deliver tier 1 interventions to everybody. They lead whole class lessons, and then they target their extra time in the classrooms at the grade levels as indicated by SABRS and My SABRS. We had talked about this being new and maybe it was too much for our staff. We were toying around with, do we do it twice? Do we do it 3 times? Ultimately, Kristen and I decided we're going to administer this assessment twice this year. But instead of waiting until the spring, because then the counselors can't do anything with the data, we have decided and already shared with the teachers, we are going to do the SABRS and My SABRS again in mid to late March. so that we can grab that data again and have another 3 whole months to really address and adjust and provide supports. So that's what's happening in terms of the data look as we look mid-year. This is something we do anyway, so putting it into the mid-year LCAP review is really not so much extra. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that information. And it really helps us understand, the why of what we're doing, the frequency of when you're doing this and why you're doing it twice a year and why you're deciding to do it at a certain time versus waiting. In addition to just the data itself, really, really helpful. So thanks for that. I wonder, you mentioned a lot about the counselors doing follow-up, which I think is terrific. Is there a follow-up with the teachers to the extent that they can, with regard to, students? In other words, one of the things I shared was a concern from teachers that they wanted to understand, how is this data being used on the SEL surveys?
Right.
And to understand, why are we doing this, right? It's
a tricky balance. So to answer your question, yes, I mean, the data, we reviewed at the counselors, we reviewed with the principals. Now, I don't go to every staff meeting, so I don't want to say that it was shared with the staff. The expectation was that it was explained and shared at the staff level to look at the school aggregate data. Now, we know things happen, so that was the intent in the plan. Teachers, so there's a delicate balance too, because the teachers were a little hesitant to fill in the survey because they felt like we're not experts. And we had to do, like almost hand-holding. It's okay, we know you're not experts. You putting your opinion and rating how often you see a certain behavior is a moment in time and it's your experience and you are an expert in that. But the follow-up then of kids who are at risk is not necessarily in the wheelhouse of the teacher to then continue. So that's where the consultation between the counselor and the staff is really helpful. The fact that our counselors attend staff meetings and are really part of the school community this year is the huge value add from having intern counselors. I mean, our One Life counselors and our Star Vista counselors in past years were good, but there were limitations because of their amount of time. Now, our counselors really are able to get to know the kids. They're in every classroom and they're able to say, this is something that we're going to do school-wide. This is something we're going to do at the class level. And they can provide the consultative services, almost like your PBIS. When they look at the office discipline referrals to say, oh, I'm seeing a spike in behavior and I always use this example because it was my own example as a principal, first grade boys during Foursquare. We're going to do a reteach for them specifically. This helps us be able to tailor our responses. It's really, I think it's a delicate balance of how often are we asking you to assess people, because how quickly can we turn around and do something? And even after we've done something, there is that need for 6 to 8 weeks of targeted, intense, monitored intervention, and then a reassessment, whether it's academics or behavioral support. That is also tricky because people want, and it comes from a place of good intent. We want our kids to get the services yesterday. And some of it is we have to be patient, because if we're really teaching the child the skills and building the resilience, that doesn't happen overnight. From the world of behavior training, if you're able to extinguish a behavior immediately, chances are you accidentally provided negative reinforcement. It's got to come down slowly. It's got to come in tiers and periodically monitored. So this is just one component of how we're monitoring the health of our students. I mean, I think overall, we're pretty pleased and to see such a high level of students who are showing little to no risk behaviors, right? I mean, this table is misleading because it starts at 82, but 89% of the kids from the teacher perspective are exhibiting little to no behavioral risks. This keeps us a little bit grounded and maintains our perspective, because it's hard too in the moment when you're dealing in crisis with that 1 or 2 children who need you every single day to remember that the 397 others are actually doing really well and moving along and making progress. Yeah.
A question on the social emotional. That's what time frame was this
This was given in October,
Not to, okay, so,
and our next one will be coming at the end of March. And as soon as we have data, I'll share that here as well.
but this is the first one that,
This was the first one. This is the first time we ever did it. And so it's as part of the LCAP review, one of our action items was to adopt an SEL screener. And so it makes sense to share about it, talk about it, put it into the mid-year update that here is a new metric that we have. One of the other new metrics that we decided upon when we wrote the LCAP last year was to step away from California Healthy Kids and instead use Youth Truth this year to really measure for student engagement and family engagement, right? That's been a little bit tricky. People feel like we're trying, it might be an aha gotcha moment. And really it's about engaging our families in a meaningful way to have both the two-way dialogue, but also to ensure that their opinions and voices are considered when we make decisions. And so we chose Youth Truth because it seems to be more responsive and gives us more data that we can act upon to support our families. So that's just something new that's different, that's causes people a little bit of stress. So that's something that I'm hearing too, but it is part of our LCAP, and we will report on that data as soon as we get it as well. Youth Truth does an amazing job where as a vendor, they put together a data presentation. So it's kind of an easy lift for the principals. Then the principals aren't doing the analysis, but they're getting to respond to the analysis with their staff to say, what do we do based off of this? So helping our principals work smarter and not harder, because I don't know, that's kind of my mantra.
I was wondering if a student's identified as high risk or some risk, is there any communication to their family then, or is it just within the school?
So that depends on kind of what follows up after that. As a screener, no, there isn't, oh my goodness, your kid, this is red flag, because that can be alarmist. The students, I mean, I didn't participate in the conversation when they went into the mid-level risk, but I was part of the conversation with the team when we were looking at the individuals in the red, so to speak. Every single child on that list, with the exception of one or two, the counselors already knew about and have already been in communications and partnering with the parents. These are not kids that were surprises. There were one or two in the middle grades that the counselors did follow up with, checked in on, and then as necessary. I mean, unfortunately, some of those kids ended up in very serious circumstances. They were kids that we'd already known about. You guys get those notifications. So they were, the silver lining is that they were kids we already knew about it. The hard part is they were kids that had very serious outcomes that have already been part of the system and working with the counselors, the principals, the psychologists. So the system is working as it's supposed to and helping us identify maybe a few pockets, like you're saying. One of the pieces from here that is different too is the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders all took the MySabers. So that's reflected here. It is available 3rd through 8th, and a few teacher leaders opted in. The counselors have offered, and we have asked our teachers moving forward in March that all 3rd graders and above take the MySabers, because it is so important to get the student perspective side by side with the teacher perspective. And it means so much to the counselors. They have offered to go into the classrooms to actually administer it for anybody who needs that technical support. So hopefully the system continues to work as it's supposed to, and we get confirming data for the students that we don't worry about, as well as confirming data for the students that are already on our radar that we are working with. Ultimately, this is the supplement to the LCAP annual update. In addition to the summary of the mid-year outcome data and expenditures that is in the packet, there is I did print it for you. There is also a description where we report, it's a federal addendum that is added to our LCAP mid-year update, where I just documented the use of all of our federal funds that were granted after our 21-22 LCAP was approved in June of 2021. So the only funds that we as a district received after the fact were the ESSER 3 funds. We came to the board in October. Rui and I presented the ESSER 3 expanded learning opportunity grant funding opportunities, and that was documented. So the federal update is really a narrative of how we engage the community in deciding how to use the dollars and how are those dollars aligned to our LCAP. Other questions? Dr. Howard.
Yeah.
You okay?
So let's start with the math testing and where we are relative to the expectations at the end of the year. A really dumb question.
No dumb questions.
How is it that children that are taught to be expected to be at a certain level at the end of the year are exceeding those expectations in the middle of the year? Where is that instruction coming from? Is it coming from us? Or are our families in this district reaching outside the district to get that instruction so that those numbers look better because our substrate's so good because our families are pushing extra education? Or is it because we're doing something magical that's allowing our shining little stars to
It's probably a little A and a little B.
breakneck pace?
Yeah, I think it's actually multifaceted. I do think we have families that support their students outside. I think that is what happens in well-to-do, well-educated communities across the bay, across the state, across the nation. So I think there's a little piece of that. One of the reasons I chose to go with the exact assessment we have been using for the past few years, and one of the reasons we choose to use an end of year assessment is because when kids leave their grade level in K1, 2, and they take their end of year assessment for K1 or 2, we get something like 98% of the kids who have mastered those standards, which is great. But then I don't actually have a sense coming into the year, what do they know of the coming year? And is it because they were so great that the teachers were able to move ahead and go deeper? We don't know until we have the data that shows this is where they're starting the year. There's a piece of that. I think we have a pacing guide that the teachers generally follow, but I do also think that we have some really great teachers who pre-test. And when kids know the chapter, when most of the kids know the unit, they go a little faster. They go on to the next thing, or they go a little bit deeper, which allows you then to take the test in the mid-year and say, I haven't been taught this exact standard or this exact skill, but because I went deeper in something I learned earlier in the year, I can make some good mathematical deductions about how to solve this problem. It's not, it's done online through Inspect, but it is problem solving. And there are some questions. There's one of my favorites in 3rd grade where you have multiple shapes together and you have some information so you can figure out the perimeter and the area. And then you're told the total area and you're supposed to try and figure out what the perimeter, what the dimensions are of the square on top. That you're never going to teach explicitly how to do that, but it's do I understand the concepts of area? Do I understand the concepts of perimeter? How do I manipulate mathematical operations to figure that piece out? And so there is, I think, really good instruction going along with our SVMI partnership, doing problem of the month, getting kids to think outside of the box beyond the worksheets and the kind of basic curriculum that comes with math expressions that adds to that. So I think it's both.
Okay.
I'm happy to see the red dropping from 40-some% to, sorry, what is that? 60-some% to 40%. That's about right. Should drop to less than 20% by June. But this is a piece where this is a benchmark. This is a dipstick measure. And not everybody follows a pacing guide in the same order. Some units are going to take longer than others. And it's going to take a finer grain assessment at the classroom level to really understand what those kids need. So our kids are using MobiMax. We bought FastBridge. We have not rolled out the academic components of FastBridge, but FastBridge owns Sabres. There is the opportunity as we get better at this to build our assessment system, to look at other pieces to dive down. What is it that those kids in the red actually need? The next piece of assessment and analysis that I have not yet done is we look at how those kids in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade did on the standards that they should have been taught. Because the other thing too is perhaps most of them are doing, if we looked at just the standards I taught, perhaps the percentage of meeting and exceeding would be higher. I haven't gotten there yet. But that's kind of the next thing. That still doesn't answer how those kids who know it all already know it all, but I think it's a combination. I mean, most likely,
Osmosis.
most likely, I mean, here's the thing. You guys are educated parents. You probably do the same thing. Your kid asks you a question to solve today's problem. You don't just give them the skills and the steps to solve today's problem. You somehow have a conversation that gives them all the other components so that tomorrow and the day after when they go to class, they're like, oh, Dad, you already talked about that yesterday, right? I think that is happening a lot. So it's this organic, because I have good work that's fostering conversation and I have good supports both in school and at home, I'm able to, I observe that at home. I tend to just help the kid with, what do you know? How do you fix it? And my husband, who was a chemistry major, gives all this extra information only for the kid to come home 2 days later. Oh yeah, Dad taught me that already.
Okay, fair enough. And there's also Sal Khan who saves our butts. I look smart now. So the behavioral piece.
Yes.
One of the things that we mentioned is that SABRS is assessment of a child's behavior. I like the subjective piece because it's, again, subjective in how you're feeling. But I do worry that in part that could introduce bias. And do we see any trends that suggest there's any bias in our assessments that don't line up with the My SABRS? So do the SABRS and My SABRS line up against the same children? Do they identify the same children, or they identify different groups, and that the My SABRS is a different set of kids that are feeling internally challenged, while the SABRS identify kids that are
Anecdotally, now I didn't look at line by line to every single one. They were identifying the same kids. And it's not all feelings and it's not all behavior. It's effort. Some of the questions are, I try hard on my work. I try to do my work to my best of my ability. Sometimes, always, never. I often get distracted. Sometimes, often, never. Right. And then it's phrased in the, for the teacher perspective, child fights with peers. Sometimes, always, never. I have difficulty with friends. Sometimes, always, never. So it's a pretty simple 1 through 4 rating. We noticed that it was pulling the same kids. I think this brings up the point of, it's really important to understand this is one metric.
Yeah.
And it's one metric in time. So our schools, in recovering from the pandemic, have taken a step back from tracking their office discipline referrals. Fox is the only one who's still maintaining their subscription to Swiss, which is the PBIS product. That's something that Chris and I are also working on bringing back this spring to really revamp and reinvigorate the PBIS work, because it's important that it's systemic and systematic. When we teach kids the expected behaviors, when we have a strong PBIS, we have taught them what it is to be safe, respectful, responsible, and inclusive. So what does that look like on the playground? What does that look like in the classroom? What does that look like? And that gets into the peer-to-peer conflict that is sometimes reflected in SABRS and My SABRS type of information. But when we have that extra piece too of what are kids struggling with on the yard and in the classroom, and why are they being sent to the office? What are the conflicts they're having? Then we can triangulate that with this piece, with academic performance, to really paint the bigger picture. So I feel a little bit like we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because we added this, but we lost something. So we got to bring that other something back so we can, without trying to kill our teachers who are already working their tails off.
Should we expect a drop in the yellow group? Because although that doesn't look like a huge number of our kids, when we talk about percentage, every 1% is 40 kids.
Yeah, that's still 400 kids right there.
Yeah. So that's a chunk of kids divided by 7. That's what, 60 per site, like that on average.
I think over time, with our SCL structures and supports in place, we want to see a decrease in the kids in the yellow as well. However, I think because it is a measure in time, and just because I show up in the yellow today, that's one measure of today, I could be feeling sad today and rating myself, but that's not how I feel about myself on the whole. So I don't know. I need to see this data. Well, I would like to see this data over time, over multiple instances to see what the trends are supposed to be.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Because I
getting at.
do
Trends are
think
helpful, right?
you'll always have 10%, but I'd be more worried if that 10% were the exact same students every single time. Because I do think, just like when we look at the, the tiered pyramid, we were talking about this at the retreat, just because I am considered a tier 1 child in math, I may be a child with tier 3 needs in Spanish and a child with tier 2 needs in social studies. And if you ask me to do this in Spanish, I might show up a little bit more elevated than if I looked over a course of different times and different assessments. And if you were to ask me to rate myself multiple times over the year, I might have one instance where I'm a little bit elevated. So I think we just need more data to know.
Yeah, I love that you're working towards the idea of building capacity to adjust toward the individual child's needs and pivot towards their strengths and pivot towards their challenges.
Right. I mean, that's the hope and the goal and all the work that we're doing. It's a heavy lift for the staff because it's understanding the various aspects of assessment. And they're not just the teacher teaching reading, writing, math, and arithmetic. As you can see, their job is huge and society expects a lot out of our teachers.
So my last question. Not that I don't have
You might have another one later.
I'm done after that. The LCAP funding for
Yes.
PD, which is being underspent for obvious reasons.
Yes.
We're not always going to be facing a time frame where substitutes are a challenge, meaning that can we shift some of that funding towards summer learning for our
Yes.
educators, especially our teacher leaders, if they're
Yes.
in those opportunities?
So I will continue. I mean, the last 2 summers have not really been indicative. We had a huge thing planned and tons of money set aside and haven't gotten it to do it yet. I am working on the summer learning opportunities for the teachers. I mean, this is also like, we can set aside the money and make the learning really exciting, but I do think we need to brace ourselves. Our teachers are exhausted.
Yep.
And maybe not feeling so motivated to continue learning because they need to disengage the summer, which is fine. But yes, we have pots of money that we can shift around to offer different things in the summer, on the weekends. Nobody wants an evening session, but we can look to. I mean, I've tried different things, and the attendance doesn't seem to improve ever. Like the other piece too that I think is actually really important is putting it during the day, during the workday when people are fresh. Not only is it good because people are fresh and ready to learn, but I think it values their time. In no other profession that I can think of, and maybe I have limited scope, but I can't think of any other profession in which you are asked to work a full day and then go do professional learning on your own and figure it out in every instance, right? Like medicine is another one where you like to torture people, but you think about my friend, right? I think about my personal network of folks in finance, folks in tech. If they're doing professional learning, it's part of the workday. And I feel like there's a piece of honoring our teachers by providing it during the workday for them.
Sure.
Which of course has its limitations. And so we need to be flexible and offer. I'm also the teacher who went to everything on Saturdays and in the evenings because I like to learn and I'm a geek, but I was single and didn't have kids. So, different times. But yes, we also do have money set aside for other programs. Part of the reason why we're underspending is we have money right now. We can't miraculously operate people who are qualified to do the job. We can't motivate people where people don't exist. And that's really part of what we're struggling with. Hiring people to do intervention, trying to get a contract to do after school at our different facilities. People are willing to contract with us, but they can't guarantee staffing. They can't guarantee staffing. I can't send kids.
Okay, thank you so much.
I actually had a follow-on question about, when you're talking about the staff being overwhelmed, we've done a lot of measurements on the students. How are the staff feeling and what are the indicators you're using?
Yeah, how's their my saver?
half jokingly, one of my principals asked me to put it together so they could do a little internal, and we never ended up doing it because it felt a little like, ooh. I think staff are overwhelmed. I think the kind of point of understanding is at the principal level. I hear from people, but I'm not at the site every single day. We get that fractal of hearing from the principals where the staff are. So my work is coaching the principals to think about how can you do things differently? What else can you add into your day? How can you build in activities to boost morale? How can you show your gratitude? That's not just, I mean, we're in the middle of planning our teacher appreciation for down the line. How can we show appreciation that isn't a trinket, which is kind of cool, but at the same time, just a trinket and doesn't maybe necessarily feel like that much gratitude. So I think at the principal level, it is something that they are all grappling with and working really hard to, not combat, but they're just really working to keep people's spirits up and to find ways to honor and alleviate stress. Another piece too, I say this to the principal all the time. I feel like I'm the one who's always pushing and driving and almost feels like COVID is awful. We're all over COVID, but at some point COVID can't be the excuse anymore because ultimately our kids have 180 days in their grade level and they get matriculated to the next grade level, whether they're ready or not. And I feel like we have a responsibility to make sure that those kids are ready. And so I do the pushing and then the principals do the emotional piece of let's stay together. Let's remember we're here for the kids. The good news is we can take the gas pedal off the academics a little because they're progressing. We can spend the time building the SEL and building the relationships at all levels with kids, with teachers, with principals, because we're fortunate to be in a community where kids are ready and performing academically. So kind of a long answer, but
No,
Thanks.
great.
you had a question earlier that you.
Jim took my question.
Actually, I was
I have
also,
10 parts. Part A, part B.
Any other questions for me?
actually, I was also gonna ask, like, is the substitute situation improving? Because you said that, it was hard for teachers to take their PD because there's no one to sub for them.
I think we were really, really feeling the crunch in December and January.
Yeah.
And now people are a little bit gun shy almost to put in for days, but I can tell you this, my staff have not been deployed to substitute in over a week and a half. So anecdotally speaking, the sub situation is getting better. We'll see what happens again after the February break, right? People need to go and take a break, but along with that comes potential risk and exposure. And that's something we're just gonna have to get through and work through.
Yeah, I'm the voice from over here. It feels pretty awkward being on Zoom. I will say, we actually looked at, I was doing some research to look at the number of positions that go on unfilled. And we do routinely have positions that go unfilled from our sub pool. We're usually able to cover it. Administrators cover, folks across the board cover. We'll pull a specialist or do a reassignment, and we're usually able to adapt reasonably easily. There was a couple weeks coming back from the January break. That first week break, I would say that there's probably a good week that we had all hands on deck. So our administrators were not only running schools and being the point, but also, covering classes and being the primary point. I'm happy to say that we are seeing some relief there, which is a good sign. The other thing that I'm just going to share when we talk about professional development, and I shared this with our staff, I am a firm believer that we have a ton of highly qualified educators in our district that have the answers. And the more we build within and the more we provide structures and supports to get teachers to collaborate with one another, i.e. what Ching-Pei was saying about, release days to collaborate, time to spend in each other's classrooms. Like, we'll get some really good mileage from that. That's just important to recognize the talent in the house. And then finally, I just want to share just a thank you to Assistant Superintendent, who the state keeps adding plans and documents and updates and narratives. And this was an added element this year. I appreciate her work and support to bring this forward and to share it. Thank you, Ching-Pei, for that support.
Thank you. No thanks necessary. I am happy to be able to do this job.
Thank you.
Okay, good night. I'll just be sitting, I'm not going anywhere.
Next item on the agenda is item number 15, the CSBA board policy updates for December. First reading.
Yes, before you tonight, as is our quarterly, I think, tradition or so of updating our policies. Before you tonight for first read is a number of policies from the December update of CSBA. Staff has gone through each of the policies, made the adjustments and suggested edits. Those are before you tonight just for a first read. As we receive feedback, we'll make adjustments and recommendations for a final approval at our next meeting.
We'll open it up for discussion or comments or questions. I can start out if not. So just confirming with the notes that we're looking at with the strike, with the editing on it. My understanding is that anything with yellow highlighting is a modification by CSBA to a previous policy, where if it's bold, it's been added. If it's has a strike through, it's been deleted by CSBA when it's yellow. But then anything that's not yellow and has a strikeout, that's something the district has chosen to exclude. And then also then if something is yellow and bold with strikeout, it's something that CSBA added, but the district is deleting. Is that correct? Or did I miss?
Would you like me to share this PDF, the first read PDF?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Ms. Ellinger to confirm that. She does an amazing job of printing out all of the policies for Cabinet, and Cabinet goes through and puts a bunch of scratches on it, and then she makes it reasonable. I believe that is her code, but if you can confirm, Ms. Ellinger, that'd be great.
Yeah, so as we go through each one of the policies, as a cabinet for the changes that are recommended, which are the strikeouts. So first you have the notes of what CSBA is proposing, and then you've got the information and then the strikeouts, that's what they are recommending. Each cabinet member will go through and say, yes, we agree to that recommendation. And then in the second reading, we will adopt it. If there's any changes, then we go ahead and make those changes, and they are highlighted in a strikeout as well. If there's something that's
just a question. So when I consider highlight, I consider something yellow as being highlight.
yes,
Strikeout would be a line through it.
correct.
So a strikeout would be something that's deleted, not.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So we are accepting that change as whatever they're proposing. So it's a deletion. And then the highlight is notes or further explanation about the policy. You still have a question?
I have a request. Would it be too much at some point to provide us with a guide to those comments just now? Like yellow means this and strikeout means this.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, and then also there is a guide in terms of, so if we look at the actual checklist, there's a guide sheet. So this was what was shared with you, I believe, when the policies came out for the updates for December. So this is a high level of what is changing, and then I can take that and put it in more of a legend of
Yeah. legend.
yellow. Okay, no problem.
I always get confused, just like Mr. Linebacker was saying that. Which which means which? Are we adding?
And there are some highlights. I know the yellow is always what's proposed by CSBA in terms of the highlight, and then the strikeouts are also from CSBA. But then as cabinet goes through it, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. As cabinet goes through, if there's anything additional that we want to strike out, we will go ahead and do so. And then if there's anything that we're adding, you'll see a green highlight so that you'll know this is what we're putting in. So there's components to it, but yes, I can put a legend.
Okay, that'll be helpful. Some questions I had, AR 6112A, there was a term called noon intermissions. I just wanted to there's recesses, but they said noon intermissions, and I'm curious if we could get a definition of noon intermissions.
So school day that I believe was Assistant Superintendent who was updating.
6112A.
There, yeah.
Actually, in the policy.
Oh, that's the expanded learning opportunity. So it's a break in the day. So the expanded learning opportunity program has to be 9 hours long. There's a break in the noon intermission is when you're not doing instruction, and it's mealtime.
Okay, so there's a student recess, but this is a time where it's not recess, it's not.
Right,
lessons,
so part of the ELOP is in the 9 hour day, there needs to be, there's the instructional day. So for kids in TK and K, there's that intermission kind of midday where their school day ends and then they transition to the expanded learning program. So it's a transition between a school day and the rest of the program, but it's not necessary, like depending on when lunch happens, lunch could happen. For our TK kids, it will be part of the after school ELOP time. For our kinder kids, they do lunch on campus.
Okay.
But then they do transition from school day to ELOP.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Now, during that intermission, they play background music.
They will run from one to the other.
Bar open, and you smoke them if you got them.
No, you cannot, because that is
I'm shaking
again
my head. Nobody
board
can see my
policy.
There are a couple of things that are minor that I might just forward in an email. But then let's see, did anyone else have any other questions? There was one, it's page 186 of document. Oh, I know, yeah. This is the board policy on notifications. There's something in our existing board policy, and we talked about this last year, I think, where it says the board shall hold at least one regular meeting each month except for July. Regular meetings shall be held at 5 p.m. on the Thursday at the district office and the address. But in the policy, it just had the template with blanks in it. So just want to make sure that we maintain that language over. And then also, with that policy, we had talked about maybe modifying our cadence of meetings. So maybe for board bylaw 9320, maybe I'd recommend pulling that out until we agree on our meeting cadence so that we can include the right language, or we could approve it as is with the old language and amend it later. But just want to make sure our new cadence is reflected.
Trustee Leinbach, what 9320, I'm having trouble just finding it here.
It's page 186.
186.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just look at it real quick. 186.
Okay, scroll down a little bit more. Keep going. There, where the blanks are.
Under regular meetings, Dan.
Yes, we will adjust that based on I apologize. I actually thought we made that adjustment to be hold regular meetings each month. Because we have a regular cadence-ish of every other, but it's hard to quantify the first week, the second week, or whatnot, because it changes as we rotate, and then with holidays. So yes, we can pull this policy. We can revisit with another discussion of when we want to facilitate regular meetings.
And I think the language in the policy online existing, we can just copy that paragraph from there here in the meantime.
Yeah, we can adjust that. We'll go ahead and rebring board bylaw 9320 back at a subsequent meeting for first read.
Yep. Everything else looks good to me. I don't see any other comments. So this is just for discussion. So we will move on to item number 16. The 2022 delegate assembly vote. So for San Mateo County Region 5 of the California School Boards Associations, we have delegate assembly seats that come up for re-election every so often, every couple of years, I think. And we have 4 candidates on the ballot. Everyone probably has a handout of it in front of you. So at this point, the first thing we'll do is have a discussion. If there's any comments anyone has on any of the candidates, we can talk about those. Then after that, we can choose to nominate any one of those candidates that we feel we want to. And then we'll, based on those nominations, someone can make a motion to have that be the ballot that the board submits to the county. So with that being said, are there any comments on any of the candidates?
I mean, I'll clarify that they are 2-year terms, so it's kind of like our elections where it rotates however many are up for election each time. So, I mean, I would say that it takes a little while to get up to speed as a delegate. And so having worked with all 3 of the incumbents, 2 of them are pretty new because they were actually appointed midway. But so far they've been doing a great job. And so I'd recommend just approve or voting for the incumbents to give them more continuity, because they're just getting started and they've come up the learning curve. And now they're to the point where they're really going to be adding a ton of value. So.
And I can add that Clayton Koo, I've known him for a number of years and worked with him through CSBA and SMCSBA activities. So I can vouch for him as a worthy candidate as well.
So it's one ballot and we vote for 3, up to 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, one ballot is the board. So yeah, I'm very comfortable nominating Clayton Koo on there.
Anyone else have any questions? I mean, I'd love to propose just voting for all 3 incumbents.
I mean, I trust both of your judgment in terms of your having worked with these folks. I haven't, so I'm relying upon your judgment on it.
Yeah, and the good thing, actually, they're very representative of our area, because I know Elisa's been working really hard to try and get diversity in the delegate membership. So Sophia, for the first time, is representing the coast side, and then we've got Clayton in the North County, and then San Mateo Foster City. So it's a good spread.
Well, Trustee Koo, what you said earlier sounded like a hint of emotion. Would you like to make it formal?
Oh, sure. Let's see. I move that the Board of Trustees vote for 3 candidates, Noelia Corzo, Clayton Koo, and Sophia Lane.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? I think we discussed it already. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, once again, 4 votes for aye, 1 absence. The motion carries. And on to item number 17 in the home stretch, the future board meeting agenda items.
Yes, we had a while between breaks between board meetings with the shift that we made. Our next board meeting is coming up really quick. We'll have a week off next week. And then we come back the following week on March 3rd with a very important board meeting. We'll be taking a look at the parcel tax resolution. That'll be on our agenda as an important item. Second interim budget is a big one as well. And then our school spotlight will be Ralston Middle School. And then for the March 24th, we'll do a facilities update. We're doing some work right now. Approved today was some work with a consultant to look at revitalizing and renewing our facilities master plan. Do some work to look at the shape of our schools, what's needed, so that we can start to build on and look towards TK expansion. So that's coming up at the subsequent meeting. We'll look at course of study, again, do another CSBA updates. We'll share kind of our status, COVID reopening, all that. It shouldn't be reopening, it should be just status. And central will be our spotlight. And then hopefully in April, we'll invite or see where the, oops, I just lost my spot there. We'll see where where Carlmont stands with their principal appointment process. See if we can get some Carlmont folks to come out and talk with us and hopefully have a report out from a Carlmont visit by then. And just go from there. There's a couple of things. The parcel tax feasibility study that's listed there was last year. So that's not on that piece. So a busy couple months coming ahead of us. Anything else you'd like to agendize for some upcoming conversation?
One thing that I wanted to bring up, we don't have to put it on because it's not till later, but just to keep it in everyone's mind. We had discussed potentially having, changing this schedule going forward, but also potentially in June, having a study session retreat to talk about our goals for the next school year. So I know, vacation schedules come up. So I'd like to start penciling in a date for that. We don't have to do that at this meeting, but maybe by next meeting, we can come up with a date that works for everyone. Maybe Ms. Ellinger can help us coordinate and facilitate narrowing down a date on that.
No problem. So we wanted to go ahead and add, I'm hearing the need to add a June planning meeting.
I would like to see that. Is any other opinions from the rest of the board?
So basically the intent would be to start discussing the goals earlier rather than waiting until August, right? Because
Or September was
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah.
That way I think the district cabinet, they have, I hate to give them homework over the summer, but at least by the first day of school.
Think of it as professional development.
Yeah. In school, we hit the ground running rather than not having a goal until mid-September, so.
Yeah, so I'll just remind the board that we have significant work to still do on our strategic plan. I know that was kind of a holdover from, was it last week? So I'd honestly probably like to agendize that first, because that really sets forth the, as you'll recall from our strategic plan, the blue and the green on the outsides allows cabinet to do the yellows on the inside. So if we plan on getting the blues and the greens done in June, I think that'll be great for us to work on over the summer, those yellows. And then we circle back around to that at our August/September retreat, if that makes sense.
I was just going to have one suggestion that maybe we can look at June, but then if the dates don't line up, we might look at, July, August, like just keep it a little bit open, because we already have 2 board meetings in June, and then some of us have graduating 8th graders. Actually, all 3 of us do. Yeah.
I will say, I will lose a majority of my cabinet in July as well. It's really the only time cabinet has had time for some significant time off. So we'll definitely work to find a date, but just we might have to be flexible.
Yeah, just better to start thinking about it now than in May.
Yeah.
So July 4th usually works for most people.
Yeah.
Dan, should we set aside some time on one of these, and I'm maybe missing it, to talk about our equity statement?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I know the board knows, but as a follow-up, at our retreat, the board was working through our equity statement. Trustee Howard and Trustee Bopali volunteered to be part of a subcommittee who we're going to do some work in the upcoming weeks. We'll agendize that for a whole board discussion as well.
Then I just had a question on the next meeting. It had the CSBA delegate assembly vote under the consent agenda. So we don't need that anymore, right? Because
No, that's been taken off. This
oh,
was
okay,
printed before.
okay. Awesome.
All right, sounds like we're good. Anything else? Okay, with that, we'll move on to our favorite. Number 18 is convening to closed session. So the board is going to convene to closed, and we don't expect any reporting out after closed session. So at this time, I will convene to closed session at 8:54 p.m.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.